And we are rolling. Good evening and welcome to the final class in our Spiritual Economics series. And before we begin, before we even pray, I want to say that it has been an absolute joy for me let's see, we're going to do that? I may have to, okay. Here we go. We're going to resume the slideshow. Great. It's been an absolute joy for me to review this book again. It's been something that has been beneficial to me in my personal life, and I pray that it's been a benefit to you also. And now we're going to pray, and as we pray, I know the present confusion with what's on my screen and what's on the view screen in our sanctuary will all clear up. You've heard let go and let God. That's used not only by Unity, but by 12-steppers and many others. And I will say, let go into my God awareness. Because let go and let God often almost seems like I'm throwing up my hands. And I'm not throwing up my hands, I'm opening my mind and my heart. That's what I'm really doing. And as I do, there is a flood of awareness, a flood of energy, a flood of love. And where does it come from? From right within me. It is that flow. We call it the flow of life, the flow of substance, and it illumines us, it animates us, it functions so beautifully, first as a partnership with our human self, and then our human self disappears into it. It merges with it. Let go into God. So as we begin tonight, I invite you to let go into God. I've just come from doing a radio broadcast of Discovering Eric Butterworth, and one of the ideas tonight is that we can see God through the lens of our problems, or we can view our problems through the lens of God awareness. And which would you rather do? Which is going to be more effective for you? Obviously, to let go into God and to view whatever is on our minds from that perspective. So we let go into God, and we know that our class unfolds in a beautiful and orderly way, with all of us being blessed. And so it is. Amen. I want to remind you that you can call in if you're listening to the live broadcast. If you're listening to the recording, of course you can't do that. But the number here at Unity of Independence is 816-252-4242. If you have a question or a comment about anything that's going on in the class, we would love to hear from you. So as we begin, let's take a look at where we've been. One of our biggest discussions of the year, and by the way, the slides are available, and tonight I just forgot to number them. I had a senior moment, and I just left out that very important step. So I'll try to describe what's on the slide as we go from one to the other. I've got numbers on my screen, but you don't have them on your slides. We looked at substance, and we recognized that many people need different ways to identify God, to describe God, to talk about God. And substance is one way of talking about God. We've seen substance as the energy that permeates the universe, that energy out of which all that is created takes its substance, its form. Substance means that which stands under. There are a lot of people who don't need more than one way to talk about God, and I bless them, but many of the rest of us do. So we've talked about substance at great length, and it's something we'll talk about again because we're always learning more about it. Here at Unity of Independence, we have a raised bed garden in our backyard, And we see substance at work because what went into the ground as seeds now is producing plants, and it won't be long before those plants are producing fruits and vegetables. That is substance at work. The fruits and vegetables aren't made out of dirt. They are made out of the energy that the seed knows how to aggregate and bring forth. It's fascinating, the intelligence in the seed. Then we looked at your fortune begins with you, and how prosperity is really a work of consciousness. It is not a financial report. A financial report may be part of your prosperity, but your fortune really begins with you, with your consciousness. We also recognize that prosperity begins when you take responsibility for your thoughts. The law of visualization was an important chapter. And if we even look at our Judeo-Christian Bible, we see that the first faculty of God that is used is imagination, used with dominion or power. The earth was a formless void, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." So, imagining the light and then declaring it to be. Then we moved on to the grateful heart. If you can believe, rather. Faith is an important factor in everybody's prosperity consciousness. As a matter of fact, faith is always active. Too often, unfortunately, it's active in a negative direction. And that is something that is a fact that we're not especially happy about, but it is a fact nonetheless. The grateful heart. We're not talking about gratitude for things, but we are talking about a heart that is open, that sees itself in the flow, and is in a constant state of gratitude, not seeking that which it does not have, but becoming more and more aware of the treasure that is its own. We talked about work, and the biggest takeaway from the work chapter for me is success is not about being there. It's not about getting there. Success is about earning the right to be there. And if you're like me, you've had at least one position in your life that you knew you hadn't really earned in consciousness. So you were constantly tense, nervous about it. You really had not earned the right to be there. When we discover our right place, when we earn the right to be there, then our awareness of the flow really continues. We reverse financial adversity. How does it begin? In consciousness. We look at the thoughts we are holding. In this chapter, Eric Butterworth cites observations from publications like the Wall Street Journal that admit that so much of the fluctuation in the stock markets and bond markets and commodities markets is due not to actual conditions, but to people's feelings. If we want to reverse financial adversity, we begin by looking at our own thoughts. Security in a changing world comes from centering ourselves in God. Security in a changing world means learning that there is nothing really that we have to protect ourselves from. We studied the money enigma, and money, of course, is such a thing for so many of us. We think it has power in and of itself, but money is only a symbol. And our money today is really only a symbol because there is no gold or silver standing under it, only the word of our government. So money is wonderful, but money is never an end in itself and never should be looked at that way. Discover the wonder of giving. Eric talked about there being two kinds of people, the takers and the givers. The takers are looking, they listen to that radio station, WIFM, what's in it for me. The givers are listening to what's in it from me. If you are a taker, you will never have enough because you're thinking about getting. If you are a giver, you're always looking at ways to give, and you're your whole satisfaction will be a wonderful thing. Now, tonight, we are looking at two chapters that I think are very exciting, and one of them may disturb people a little bit. We're going to take a new look at tithing, and we're also going to look at a new world order with a special message from Charles Fillmore. So, let's continue. Chapter 11, it's interesting that chapter 11 would be a new look at tithing. You've heard the story, I'm sure, about the businessman who was really down on his fortunes, and he said to his friend, I don't know what I'm going to do. And his friend said, read the Bible. You'll find your answer there. So the two friends didn't see each other for a month or so, and when next they met, the first friend saw that the second friend was really bright and cheerful. He said, I'll bet you looked at the Bible, didn't you? He said, yes, and I found my answer. Tell me, what did the Bible tell you? He said, well, I opened it up and put my finger down on the page, and there it was, unmistakably, chapter 11. If you follow the business pages at all, chapter 11 is part of the bankruptcy code. All right. Tithing is normally encouraged, Eric Butterworth says, for all the wrong reasons. Do I tithe to get things, or to get a greater awareness of divine law? Now, there's the question. A lot of people say that Eric says tithing is not good. Eric does not say that tithing is not good. He says that tithing is not a panacea. It's something else. Tithing can be a way of getting into a giving consciousness, but it's not a substitute for a giving attitude. In other words, mechanical tithing doesn't take the place of a giving attitude. Even though the organizations and individuals to whom and to which you are tithing may appreciate the money, it's not going to do you any good until you develop a consciousness of giving. And here's a verse from Luke. Give, and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down and shaken together and running over, shall men give into your bosom. That's from King James. For with the same measure that ye mete, withal it shall be measured to you again. In other words, what you give is what you get. If what you give is miserliness, you're going to get that back at you. I haven't had a single question or comment yet. Remember, you can call 816-252-4242. Anybody here find anything to take issue with yet? I don't see those expressions on faces that says someone's about to speak. Well, let's continue it then. Remember, it's the attitude. Now, let's look at that in a non-monetary way. Have you been to, for example, a restaurant where the service was absolutely fabulous and the server actually added to the value of the meal for you by the way that he or she served the food, talked about the food, treated you, made sure that everything was clean and you had what you wanted, not hovering but seeming to know when your water glass needed filling? You know that. You know the deal. I remember one time I was out with a colleague, and before we left, we asked the waitress to come and sit down for a second, and we actually told her how much her service had meant to us, and we made sure that we went well beyond the normal tip, just so we would prove it. Words are great, and we know that people work for a living, and they appreciate that reward too. Now, here is something that is going to surprise one or two people. It's a question. Did Jesus teach tithing? You believe that Jesus taught tithing? You don't know. What about you, Christine? You don't know. And Barbara? Okay.
And you know, even if it says so in the Bible, it's hard to say.
Okay. Even if it says so in the Bible, what?
You know, we don't know what Jesus taught.
Well, you've been listening to me long enough that you know that we will never know for sure what Jesus taught. We know what some of his followers heard and how they developed his teachings, and that's what we find in the Gospels. Jesus was long gone by the time the first of those Gospels was written. That's a beautiful insight. Now, we know that the discipline of tithing has been strongly stressed by many teachers in the field of New Thought or metaphysics. Yes, it has. And we know about the 4T program. It's still around. It's not as popular as it once was, but I remember when it came out, it was the hottest thing in Unity, and people's lives were being transformed by it. And the 4T, of course, was tithe your time, your talent, and your treasure. That was the 4 T's. And it was a requirement of the course that you do exactly that, that you
That's only 3.
The first is tithe.
Oh.
Okay, that gives us 4. Good question, though.
I didn't understand it at the time when it was talked about.
Did you go to one of the classes?
No.
Okay. Well, we may take a look at it again sometime. I understand there's a new program. The person who wrote the original has passed on, but his family is carrying it forward. So, in view of Jesus' constant attempt to upgrade the Mosaic laws and his clear outline of the principles of abundant living, Eric said, it might be assumed that Jesus would have a lot to say on the subject of tithing, but he doesn't. The word tithe comes up only twice in the Gospels, and never in any of the writings of Paul, or in the book of Revelation, or in the book of Acts. In the book of Acts, there is a charming chapter on giving, chapter 5, where the deal was you had to give it all. They were communists, the earliest Christians. It wasn't a tithe, it was everything, and you would get back according to your needs. It was kind of channeling Karl Marx almost 2,000 years earlier than he lived. Pardon me?
Communal living.
Yes, communal living, or communism. Communism today is a dirty word for a lot of people, but communal living was what early Christianity was about. And the reason why it hasn't succeeded is because people are always comparing notes. Am I giving more than I'm getting? Am I getting cheated? Am I getting ripped off? Until we can get out of that consciousness into a giving consciousness, we aren't there. We haven't arrived. Barbara?
You know, when I was just looking at this...
It's not on.
It's not on. Is it on now?
No, it's not. That's all right. Go ahead. We'll translate.
It's like, I know what's wrong, I didn't turn it up. I have seen tithing at work, and it's all based on joy.
Okay, you've seen tithing at work?
Right. Where people give it in joy.
Right.
It doesn't matter how much they give.
Right.
They're giving what they have in joy and just wanting to give.
That's it.
And their lives are just filled with abundance.
When we are in it, yes, exactly right.
And people who give because I've got to do this because it says I've got to give, 10%, 9%, their lives show it. I mean, it's part of that attitude.
It's getting your ticket punched.
Yeah. And I remember one day hearing little Joel. He was so happy.
Joel is 2 years old. He is the grandson of one of our board members.
He had some change, and he just couldn't even wait for the plane
Yeah.
to go. He was out in the aisle.
Uh-huh.
And he went and got some more, and he was giving with so much joy and so much fun that this whole building was filled with light.
If you didn't hear that, it was Barbara talking about little Joel, who, like I said, is 2, being at church one Sunday, and his grandma gave him a couple of coins to put in the offering basket. And our offering baskets, by the way, we don't use bags. We have real baskets woven by one of our licensed Unity teachers. I absolutely love holding them. I love the whole concept of them. I think they're fantastic. Anyway, I remember the story. As a matter of fact, I vaguely remember the event of being taken to church for perhaps the first time since my baptism. That was a Roman Catholic church, and as many Catholic churches did at the time, they had 2 collections. And I had 2 nickels, one for each collection, and I was excited about participating. And that whole idea of taking an offering in church is symbolic of bringing something for the sacrifice, I didn't know that then. I was 3, maybe 4 years old. I remember, I was told this many times, so maybe my memory is not of me, but of them telling me. After the second collection, I said, I don't have any more nickels, let's go home. The giving, if it's joyous, it doesn't matter what it is. I remember a time in Fresno, California, where there was a disabled woman. She was developmentally disabled, who would come to church every Sunday. She'd come to the early service because she was shy around people. And one Sunday she took an envelope and she put 19 pennies in it, and she sealed it up, she put her name on it. And at the end of the month, we used to write monthly thank you letters. It was one of the things we did every month. And I sent her one, and somebody who happened to be there said, the stamp is going to cost more than the gift was worth. I said, I don't care. She gave, and she needs to be acknowledged. That's part of boosting her in the whole idea of giving, and everybody has something to give. It might be a fortune, it might be no money at all, but it might be something else. I remember the story, and it's a published story, of and I think I may have told it in this class, of a Vietnam War veteran who had fallen on hard times. He was homeless, living under a bridge, and one afternoon, right around lunchtime, he was at I don't know what exactly the building was, but he was waiting for lunch. They served lunch there to homeless people, and he noticed there was moss on the roof. And moss on the roof is not a good thing. You need to get it off. So he said, if somebody has a ladder, I will gladly climb up and pull that moss off the roof. So he did. And then he volunteered for other odd jobs. And then one day they needed somebody to help with office work. He said, I could do that if somebody could front me a pair of reading glasses, because I need reading glasses to see print. So somebody got him reading glasses, and there he was. Next thing you know, he's got a paid job. I talked to him, and the last I had talked to him, he'd managed to get an apartment. He had a girlfriend, and it was getting serious. It all started because one day he said, rather than just sitting here waiting for lunch, I'm going to see what I can give. So when we get that attitude, we're in good shape. So Jesus makes only 2 references to the practice of tithing, and in both of those references, somebody's being criticized. Believe that? Let's take a look. Matthew 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Now, a hypocrite is an actor. That's what the word originally meant. It did not have a negative connotation. It meant fake it till you make it, actually. Well, no, it meant play a role. It didn't mean fake it till you make it. For you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and you have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. Those are part of your giving too. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. In other words, yeah, we need the money, but we need the other stuff more, or the money is helpful. I'm not going to say we need it. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. You see some energy there? I do. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. That's his chant here. For you clean the outside of the cup and of the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup so that the outside also may become clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside look beautiful, but inside they are full of the bones of the dead and of all kinds of filth. So, this comes from the writer of the Gospel of Matthew, who obviously had some energy on this whole idea of being precise and mathematical about your giving and persnickety about it. I've known ministries where they did not pass an offering basket, but had one in the rear of the sanctuary. Some liked it better that way, and I thought about that for a while until I realized that people need a way to participate during the service itself. So whether they put something in or just bless the basket as it passes, I want folks to have that opportunity. So that's why I decided not to go the basket in the back route, not just because I thought we'd get more money if we passed the baskets. So you also on the outside look righteous to others, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Okay, so that's one of the references to tithing. And believe it or not, all of the references to tithing that we see, or the vast majority, except for these two, come from the Hebrew Scriptures. Now, here we go again. This is Luke, and Luke, you know by now, is my favorite gospel. Woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and herbs of all kinds, and neglect justice and the love of God. You can see by the fact that both Matthew and Luke use this, and it's not in Mark, that this had to be a story that was going around in Christian communities. You neglect justice and the love of God. It is these you ought to practice without neglecting the others. For you love to have the seat of honor in the synagogues and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces. Woe to you, for you are like unmarked graves, and people walk over them without realizing it. Wow. And from Mark, look at this now. This is the opposite. He, meaning Jesus, sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on. Interesting, huh? In other words, it isn't the dollar amount, it is the significance of the gift to you. And one of the things I've found is that true givers, while they don't give irresponsibly, always give with joy. I'm not going to miss that money. I haven't done it here, but I will someday. I haven't done it here because someone else blesses the offering. But I asked people to look down at the check or the banknote that they were going to put in and ask themselves honestly, how do you feel about what you are about to give? Are you feeling embarrassed because it isn't enough? Are you feeling very proud of yourself because, wow, this is a lot of money? Are you feeling that it's going forth to do the work of lifting human consciousness through this ministry? Or are you saying, boy, am I going to miss that money? If you're going to miss the money, or if you're overly proud of who you are in relationship to others, put it all back in your wallet. But if you're giving for the sheer joy of giving, knowing that your giving makes a difference, thank you for your gift. And that's important. All right. Yes.
Are there any references to it in the Old Testament?
Oh, sure.
I was just thinking about...
Those of you who are looking... Go ahead.
I was just thinking about they're always giving to their family or...
There are a lot of references to giving,
yeah.
But the references to tithing are less. Let me just get a few here. The word tithe shows up 16 times in the New Revised Standard, and of course there are variations, and that's about right. There's 18 in some translations, 13 in others. It's not talked about nearly as much as some people say. My favorite reference to tithing is from the book of Malachi, chapter 3. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, so that there may be food in my house, and thus put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts. See if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you an overflowing blessing. Before this, verse 9 of Malachi, which you can't see right now, there's a reason for that. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the full nation of you, the whole nation of you. Robbing God, people said, eh? Isn't that something? Deuteronomy and Numbers have a lot to say about tithes. So does Nehemiah, and so does one of the apocryphal books. But it's not talked about all that much. Now here is the most interesting, let's see. as far as giving is concerned, I want to take you to the book of Acts, and all came upon everyone, this is Acts 2, because many signs and wonders were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? And day by day, the Lord added to the number of those who were being saved. Now we go to Acts 5, where there's a cute little story. And Acts 4 re-emphasizes the people sharing their possessions. Acts 4 verse 34, there was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to any who had need. Okay? But there was this fellow named Ananias and his wife Sapphira. You ever heard of an Ananias Society? The Ananias Society is a society of people who are adept at telling lies. Okay? So Ananias and his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property. With his wife's knowledge, Ananias kept back some of the proceeds and brought only a part and laid it at the apostles' feet, which he was supposed to do. Ananias, Peter asked, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep back part of the proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, were not the proceeds at your disposal? How is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You did not lie to us, but to God. Now when Ananias heard these words, he fell down and died. And great fear seized all who heard of it. The young men came and wrapped up his body, then carried him out and buried him. After an interval of about 3 hours, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter said to her, tell me whether you and your husband sold the land for such and such a price. And she said, yes, that was the price. Then Peter said to her, how is it that you have agreed together to put the Spirit of the Lord to the test? Look, the feet of those who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. Immediately she fell down at his feet and died. When the young men came in, they found her dead. So they carried her out and buried her beside her husband, and great fear seized the whole church and all who heard of these things. Now, is this a recounting of a historical fact? I hope not. But I've used it as a prosperity lesson. Because here were people who made an agreement and then did not keep the agreement. Did Peter kill them? No, they just dropped dead. And why did they drop dead? Because they'd cut themselves off from their source by greed. That's a metaphysical interpretation. Any other interpretation will have to be up to you. Okay. All right. So that was a discourse into Bible. We have one last passage here that I really want to share. And this is in slide 9. One of my favorite verses in all of Scripture. As a matter of fact, I think it is a hub for starting a conversation with people who are not necessarily of our tradition. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? That's it. To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Okay? You see that? Do you see what a genius there is there? It's really all up to you, but you must make peace with your understanding of God, whatever it is. And honestly, your understanding of God does not make as much difference as whether you make peace with it. I have been at peace with people whose understanding of God differed so radically from mine that people would ask, how could you talk together? And my response is, it isn't even difficult, because we're both coming from the same place. Yes, Christine?
Would you equate justice with judgment of the powers?
With the power of discernment used from the higher level, from the level of, yes, absolutely. And justice would also be understanding. It would also be order. It would also be will, It's also love. All of the faculties probably go into justice, but discernment is one of the major ones. Have you ever eaten a dish and tried to identify the different elements in it, like in a sauce? I love to do that. Some things I can always taste, but very often I'm just mystified. One of the things I love is it's a green. It's a Latino green. Maybe it's cumin.
It isn't green.
No, that isn't green. That's a spice. Pardon? Basil is, that's good too, but there's another green, not oregano. No, this has a very distinctive flavor. It'll come to me. Well, I've had that in salads too.
Anise.
Yeah, that's not it. Okay, Jesus taught giving. The spontaneous process of giving. Okay? Some people come into this world seemingly already well equipped with this idea of giving. I've told the story, and I'm sure there are many children like this, of the year-old baby who was seated in his high chair eating a cookie, as only babies can eat cookies, really, really giving it a good workout. And he saw me come into the room. It was a kid I knew. He took the cookie and reached out to me. So what could I do? I took the cookie, took a little nibble, and gave it back to him. I was so thrilled. I met that boy years later, and his mother said he was still as much a giver as he was when he was a baby. Okay. Again, give and it shall be given unto you. Those who give. Now, the trick is you can't give expecting that people are going to recognize your giving. You recognize it. That changes your energy. Will people eventually respond to you differently? I believe they will. But if that's why you're giving, for people to respond to you differently, that's not a gift. That's a bribe or a purchase. You see? Okay. The Old Testament dealt with the law of giving, which is fundamentally supportive, on the basis of the practice of tithing, which was completely coercive. Do you know that a tithe was a tax? You know how the tithe got started?
Tax to the king.
Nope, not a tax to the king. Not in the Hebrew tradition. Jacob had 12 sons.
Oh.
He did. And when he was elderly and knew that his time was short, he divided up his vast holdings among 11 of his 12 sons. Okay? And the 12th son, Levi, got no lands, but what he did get was a 10% tithe of everything his brothers earned. So his family lived on the tithes, which were not a gift. They were a tax. The first tithing we see in the Hebrew Scriptures is from Abraham to Melchizedek. Gave him a tenth of all he had. That was a tithe to that particular, well, you could call him a king, you could call him a priest. He's a mystical figure in the Hebrew Scriptures.
Levi kind of killed, or not killed, but the brothers thought he was, and then he ended up in Egypt.
That was Joseph.
Oh, right.
That was Joseph. Okay, Levi and his sons were the priestly class, and the priestly class continues in the Hebrew tradition to this day. Okay? So the practice of tithing was coercive. there are some churches where you are required to tithe as a condition of membership. There are some unity churches where you are required to tithe as a condition of board membership. And I understand people's reason for making that requirement. I don't agree with it because it is coercive. All right. Jesus taught the law of consciousness that we always have a choice and we have to live with the effects of the choice. I've always taught people that the spiritual community, the church, can deliver service in proportion to the resources it receives. That is not a guilt trip. It's not saying you got to give us more so we can do more. The statement is we will do what we can with the resources that we have. It's as simple as that. You see? And whatever those resources are, we will use them wisely, be good stewards of them, and use them joyously. So, if you would receive more, you can give more, but you've got complete freedom, always. You always have freedom, okay? All right. Now, what he calls tithing is training wheels. And before you get too concerned about that, we're on slide 12 now. He gives probably the best description of what training wheels are that I've ever heard. And of course, there are people who have developed a strong prosperity consciousness through tithing. It is a good thing to do, provided that you use it as a spiritual training exercise to develop a consciousness of giving in yourself. If you use it to allow yourself to say, oh, what a good person am I, that's the wrong reason. You see? Tithing isn't a divine law. Giving is a divine law. Tithing is a way of giving, but tithing itself is not the law. Tithing is not a magic cure-all for all ills. There's no magic at all in it. You know, even just as there's no magic in saying that if you hit 1,000 golf balls a day and practice your swing with a teacher, you'll be a good golfer. There's no magic there. It's exercise. Exercise.
You can't help but give, though. Even a smile to somebody is giving.
That's right. That's right. The story of the waitress. You've heard the story of the waitress who had a smile for everybody? Lots of smiles for everybody? And they asked her, well, what's up with that? And she said, well, the management made a rule that every customer had to get a smile. And that annoyed me. So I said, I have to give them one smile, so I'll make sure they all get more than one smile. The first one is required, the others are all voluntary, and it turned out to be fun. Okay. You can tell me what I have to do. See, this is why, one of the reasons why I advocate the love offering plan so strongly. When you tell people what you expect for a particular service or workshop or class, that's probably what you're going to get. When you leave yourself open to what they value it as, to what they decide to give, well, you might not get that much, but you might get a whole lot more. And you are giving the class or the workshop rather than selling it. You see? Yeah. The only thing I ask is that everybody prayerfully and carefully consider what they give in return for what they are receiving, and also as a way of developing their giving consciousness. So if prosperity results from tithing, it's come from the fulfilling of the laws. You give, so you receive. Now, bicycle riding. You remember when you were a kid, did you wonder, as I did, how do people stay up on two wheels? That was one of the great events of my young life. Might have been the first one. The first really big one. Riding a two-wheeler. And I had this miserable old bike that had belonged to my aunt. The tires were old and dry-rotted. They wouldn't hold air. But my father ran along behind me, just trotting along as I pedaled and pedaled and pedaled. And one day, we didn't have training wheels on that bike. One day I saw him in front of me, and I realized I was riding the bike. Wow, what a feeling. We were on a basketball court going round and round, one at a playground. And unfortunately, I rode the bike into one of the goalposts at that point because my father was standing here and I had to go around him. He said, "Why didn't you just keep coming toward me?" I said, "I didn't want to hit you, Dad." He said, "Well, I could have moved." The goalpost, of course, could not. But you feel that balance. When I ride my Red Rocket, there's no concern about being on 2 wheels instead of 4. In fact, it's fun because you feel balance working with inertia. You tend to keep moving in the same direction you've been going. If you roll a quarter across a table, it will do the same thing. And I love to, if I see a red light, I take my hand off the throttle and then roll up to the throttle as slowly as I can. And more times than not, that light's going to turn green before I get there, so I'm not going to have to put my foot on the ground. That's fun. It's always fun. So the training wheels help you experience the working of the law. Vicki?
I remember before I learned how to drive a car, I couldn't imagine how I could get my feet and my hands, in fact my whole body, my eyes, my ears, coordinated to do that.
Yeah.
And you don't even think of it. It just comes natural.
Do you have a stick shift in your car?
Not anymore.
Yeah, but you did for a while. I was so proud when I learned to drive a stick shift, and the first day was purgatory. But I had a stepdaughter, and when her 16th birthday came, I took her to get her permit, and at that time I had a standard shift car with a 5-speed transmission. And I took her to a side street, and I said, "All right, now we have our first lesson." And I said, "Don't worry if the shifting is difficult, you'll get it." So she gets behind the wheel, fastens her seatbelt, adjusts the seat in the mirrors, puts her foot on the clutch, puts the car in gear, and takes off as though she'd been driving forever. I said, "Carol, I'm not going to get mad, but tell me, who have you been practicing with?" She said, "Nobody." "Well, how did you learn to drive like that? How did you learn to shift like that?" She said, "Well, you know how I always tell Mom that I get sick riding in the back seat?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I've been watching you for a year. Everything you do with your feet and your hands as you drive the car." And she said, "I just did all of that right now." And she hit a rough patch about 3 weeks in. But she really had excellent hand-eye coordination and hand-eye foot coordination. She also had a lead foot. Like, I don't know why it is about girls and women, but they tend to drive pretty fast. My wife, if we're going someplace a long distance away, if she's driving, we'll get there quicker than if I'm driving. It's just the way it is. All right, so the training wheels help you experience the law. Just like a tandem jump helps you experience the laws of aerodynamics working in parachuting. You don't do it by yourself the first time, you go with a partner. So why do we insist on the distinction, Eric asks. Too often, he believes, organizations sell the tithing practice as a way of achieving sustained support. And Eric doesn't like that. He thinks it's basically dishonest. What we need to teach is responsibility to lead the person to understand the process of giving way to the divine flow. So the offertory statement should not be a commercial for the church, but it should be an invitation to experience the flow. Achieving that balance is something we continue to work toward. Okay? Now, you come to the 4:30 service and you hear me talk about the whole gift. This is where it comes from. It comes from Eric Butterworth. Tithing is an excellent means of achieving the giving consciousness, but it's got to be more than writing a check. It's all of us. Okay? When Jesus criticized the Pharisees for tithing without love, he could have been implying that they tithed decimally and not spiritually. I will never forget a man who put a $1,000 bill in the offering basket, or bag it was, at that church one Sunday. I knew who had done it. It's the only $1,000 bill I'd ever seen. Yeah, there are a few around.
I thought they didn't do it anymore.
It was just a bill, no envelope. I knew who had done it. So I asked him, I said, don't you want a receipt for your records, for your taxes? And he got angry with me. He said, you weren't even supposed to know that it was I who gave that money. He said, Jesus tells us that the left hand shouldn't know what the right hand is doing. I apologized. Much more often I've encountered people who are upset at not being properly thanked. But this man was upset that I'd thanked him at all. Okay? So, he didn't give to be thanked. He gave to give, just for the joy of it. All right. The whole tithe. Oh, this is such a beautiful story. As a matter of fact, it's so beautiful that I put the whole thing in the next slide. We've shared it in church recently, but I want to share it again for those who haven't been part of our church service. In Acts 2, you know, the descent of the Holy Spirit and the tongues of fire and the speaking in tongues and 3,000 people converted. It's a very, very, very big day. Acts 3 is a different kind of big. One day, Peter and John, faith and love, were going up to the temple at the hour of prayer, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. By the way, in their parlance, that would be called the 9th hour, because the day starts at 6 a.m., it ends at 6 p.m. And a man lame from birth was being carried in. People would lay him daily at the gate of the temple, called the Beautiful Gate, so that he could ask for alms from those entering the temple. When he saw Peter and John about to go in, he asked them for alms. Peter looked intently at him, as did John, and said, look at us. In other words, look at faith and wisdom, faith and love, rather. And he fixed his attention on them, expecting to receive something from them. But Peter said, I have no silver or gold, but what I have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, stand up and walk. And he took him by the right hand and raised him up, and immediately his feet and ankles were made strong. Jumping up, he stood and began to walk, and he entered the temple with them, walking and leaping and praising God. Cool, huh? A total gift. And I doubt that Peter planned to do it. It was just something that in the moment he knew he could do. Did this actually happen? I don't know, and I don't care. I love the spirit that it conveys. That spirit of giving. I can do this.
And that spirit of receiving.
Yes.
He stood up.
Yeah. He could have said, hey, listen, my deal is I'm an invalid. That's the way I want to stay. It's safer that way. You can't fall off the floor. Remember what Elvis Presley used to do? He would walk into a Cadillac dealership. He loved Cadillac convertibles. And he would see somebody looking at a Cadillac convertible. He'd say, what's your favorite color? And they'd tell him. And he'd walk over to a salesman and said, give him one in that color. He'd just give Cadillac convertibles to total strangers. Imagine having that happen. Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't have to be anything worth any value at all. I have had people, and of course not anymore because they're PowerPoints, but people in the past who would say, I wish I could have a copy of your sermon notes, and I just happen to have my copy, so I'd hand it to them. You would think I'd written them a check for a lot of money, but it was worth that to them, you see. When you give people something they really, really, really want to have, it's just a beautiful thing. So that's the chapter on tithing. And I hope you got from it that while tithing is good, it's not a panacea, it's not the end-all, it is a training device for a giving consciousness.
What chapter was that about Peter and Paul?
That was Acts chapter 3. Peter and Paul, Peter and John.
Peter and John.
Yeah, Peter and John. So chapter 12 is a new world order, and that chapter gets its title from the Great Seal of the United States, the Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order for the ages, is what's written on the Great Seal. The Founding Fathers had a vision. Now imagine their 18th century technology, but their minds brilliant, seeing things that have been brought to form in our day, but maybe not quite brought to the form that they saw them in, eh? Could it be? I think maybe. So this chapter is an inspiring one. Eric says, as I achieve prosperity, I at once also become an influence for abundance in the world. Now, that statement always makes me think of Warren Buffett, because if there's anybody who's an influence for abundance in the world, it's Warren Buffett. He's a very unassuming man. He drives his own car, and I think the car is 5 or 6 years old. He believes in giving to his kids, but not giving them so much that he cripples them. And he's a strong believer in possibilities. He is anything but a naysayer.
And he lives in the same house he started out in.
Does he really?
Yeah.
That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. It doesn't put on airs. No way, no how. Now, there was a New Thought preacher. He's passed away now. His name was the Reverend Ike. And somebody asked, Reverend Ike was known for his flamboyant lifestyle. And he did live a flamboyant lifestyle. Somebody asked him once, almost accusingly, Reverend Ike, what can you do to help the poor? And he said, young man, the best thing I can do to help the poor is not to be one of them. Now, before you dismiss that as mere arrogance, think of the power in the statement. You demonstrate by your very example that people can live a different way. All right? And not by looking down at those in humbler circumstances, but by just showing them what you have done. It works. So we become an influence for abundance or an influence for lack, depending on how we live. Each of us has the marvelous opportunity to usher in this new world order in which people of awareness will live with what Thoreau calls the license of a higher order of beings. Instead of ain't it awful, it'll be what wonders will we discover next? When I move toward prosperity, the whole economy improves. Let there be prosperity on earth, and let it begin with me. There you go. Okay? Now, I've known people who had it all figured out. I remember once, I forget where it was, but a woman called the church, and she said, I'm calling 20 churches. If everyone gives me $100, I'll have enough money to do what I want to do. Bad plan. I had another person call me. This is somebody I'd seen in church, and she said, I just need another $100 to have enough money to get the deposit on an apartment I really, really want. That's lovely. Whose is that? Okay. And she wanted the church to write her a check. I said, well, I'm not going to write you a check, but I will pray with you. She said, oh, all right. She said, so we prayed. I see her in church the next Sunday. She's beaming. And she said, you'll never guess what happened. I said, I probably won't, so you better tell me. She said, after we hung up, I turned on the radio. I was kind of despondent, and they were having a contest, and caller number 6 was going to get $100. So I picked up the phone, and guess who was caller number 6? Now, that's almost seemingly magic, and I hope she didn't see it that way. But when we get ourselves in the flow, we have what we need when we need it, and we can make good use of it. You see? It really is a powerful, powerful thing. We don't lose sight of substance. Because remember, Wherever substance is at all, the whole of substance must be, and because substance is present everywhere, God is present everywhere, the whole of universal substance must be present at every point in space at the same time. Whoa. That's pretty awesome. Consciousness rules. Back to chapter 2. Lack is the result of some sort of obstruction in the free flow of the creative process. It's either communally or individually, sometimes both. We have to watch out for words like just and only. Okay? You can't begin to understand the prosperity law until you are willing to take charge of your life, to own your life. It's my life. I owe my life to the world. The universe owes me a living. Remember that? Your consciousness has, at the very least, contributed to putting you in the place where you happen to be. And because that's true, it's also true that when you begin to assume mastery of your thoughts, you become attuned to an evolution that leads to what you desire. Is that amazing or what? Okay? If you could realize your full potential. Now, don't let this be a guilt trip. Don't let it be a guilt trip at all. Not one person in a million is living up to the best that's in him. So we're all in good company. Are you making the most of your inner resources? I have to say that I believe I'm moving in that direction, but I know I haven't arrived. Okay? I know I haven't arrived, and that's fine. I could beat myself up for all the missed opportunities, or I could say, let's catch the next one. And that's what I try to do today. And let's make the most of the one we're working with. When you ride the subway or bus or stand in a crowded elevator and look into the faces of the people around you and try to imagine what life would be like if all these people should suddenly awake and become their best possible selves. I mean, it looks like the final scene of a musical, doesn't it? Everybody becoming their best possible self. Why not? Yeah.
What I would like, even though peace and all that, what I would like is no competition. No competition to the death, so to speak.
All right.
Because the whole...
The Apostle Paul says, he invites, I forget which of the letters it is, outdo each other in showing kindness, he says.
Oh, well, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. It's a kind of a competition.
But not...
Yeah, I don't like competition either.
Not to be glorifying oneself either.
Right. Well, we always need something to strive for, and if we can have that without being cutthroat about it, that's a good thing. We always need something to strive for. Not that we want to say that what we have isn't enough, but there's always something to strive for and to help each other out. So, if all people should suddenly awake and become their best selves, then look in the mirror and say, hey, what about me? What about me? Okay? I can be my best self. If I do that, I've taken care of my part of the responsibility. And I truly believe the Tom Sawyer effect is active here. You know Tom Sawyer with Aunt Polly's fence and the whitewash. I use that illustration all the time. He made it seem like such a delight to be painting that fence that pretty soon all his buddies were helping out and having a good time, by the way. Having a good time. Well, that was Tom. He was part genius and part fool. Okay. So.
Joker.
Yeah. Poverty is corrected, but not by doling out money. You know, that has to be done to get people through emergencies, but it's never a solution to the problem. You help people change their self-image and achieve a rich mentality. Do you like the sound of that word? I know I do. A rich mentality. Poverty as a collective condition can only be corrected by helping people one by one to stir up the gift of God within them. Ooh, wow. One person at a time. We look at people. We don't look at what we see. We look at what's possible. And we recognize that every person's success, if it's a good success, a real success, a genuine, legitimate success, breeds success in others. One of my favorite stories is of the man who adopted a 6th grade class in New York City. And he promised them that if they stayed the course and graduated high school and were accepted to college, he would pay their way, all the way through college. And a surprising number of them did exactly that. They graduated, and he paid their way through college. Not everyone.
Did that here. He set up a foundation, and they still do it.
Who did that?
Kaufman.
Oh, Ewing Kaufman.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing man. Quite a guy. And one of the reasons why he lived a life of such abundance was because he gave. Yes, he gave us the K, which I enjoy, and the Kaufman Center, which I enjoy even more. I really do. As one person changes his level of thought, the consciousness of the whole changes to that degree. When I put these slides together for today, I had such a good feeling that nothing could corrupt. I mean, really. So the New World Order, remember, it used to be taught, at least subtly, that it's a sin to be prosperous. It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. I heard that in the 1st grade, and it hit home, and I said, uh-oh, if I want to get to heaven, I better not ever be rich. I almost remember the day. And Lordy Lord, have I had an interesting relationship with abundance all my life because of that embedded belief, which I can now smile about. There was a time when I couldn't even admit it. Okay. So we felt guilty. The righteous use of the laws of spiritual economics is a powerful influence for prosperity in the world. Self-reliance, not looking to others or to government. Boy, Eric sounds like a Republican there, and I think he was. I'm not 100% sure. You do what we can with what we have right where we are. Now, government can cooperate by making that what people have just a little bit easier to get, to earn. And people can cooperate by using it well. All right? The solution to the world economic problems. Wow, imagine that, the solution to all of them. It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. The heart of the problem is not out there somewhere, but in the consciousness of each person. And so we look in a mirror and say to ourselves, it's high time that we stop being a part of the problem and start being a part of the solution. And that is the solution, a collective consciousness of the ever-presence of God substance. Do you see? That's the solution. It really is. This is not some pie-in-the-sky nonsense. Now, some people will say, but others aren't getting with it. Well, you can, I can, and as we do, others will. So when you think of substance, even begin to experience the free flow of substance in your life, you are a vital part of that which makes for prosperity for all. When I see someone living well, I don't mean living ostentatiously, but living well. That is an inspiration to me. You see? Living well. And here's Charles Fillmore. We're almost home. In the new era now at its dawn, he says, we shall have a spirit of prosperity, The principle of the universal substance will be known and acted upon, and there will be no place for lack. I can hear Mr. Fillmore's words, his voice saying these words. Supply will be more equalized. There will not be millions of bushels of wheat stored in musty warehouses while people go hungry. There will be no overproduction or underconsumption or other inequities of supply, for God's substance will be recognized and used by all people. Men will not pile up fortunes one day and lose them the next, for they will not fear the integrity of their neighbors. Is this an impractical utopia? The answer depends on you. Just as soon as you individually do your part in quickening the consciousness of the whole economy. And when did Charles Fillmore write these words? During the Great Depression. He never lost his optimism, even as Unity had to trim its sails.
Unity Farm.
Pardon?
Unity Farm, they didn't build anything until later.
Right, they had things started that had to be stopped for a while. The world is so big and the problem of poverty and hunger so widespread that you might be thinking, what can I do? I mean, just a drop in the ocean. But Canon Farrar, he had the answer. I'm only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I ought to do. And what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I will do. So it's about taking the message of this course to heart and going out and living it, and remembering finally these words of Charles Fillmore, who at the age of 93 said, I fairly sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm, and I spring forth with a mighty faith to do the things that ought to be done by me. And so we're right on time, ready for our offering. And as you give your offering tonight, whether it's money or simply the remembrance of all of the thoughts, words, and actions that you have invested in the upliftment of humankind, let your heart be great and full. Let your heart be great and full. Divine love, as me and through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, all that I receive, and my awareness of all that I am. Hear that. Feel it. And as you put your offering in the basket here, or as you click the offering button on either the truthunity.net homepage or the unityindependence.com homepage, remember that the gift you are giving is radiating out to do more and more good work because you have given it in love. Thank you for being part of Spiritual Economics. We consecrate this offering that we've received here, and those of you who watch or watching can see the lovely basket. It feels nice to hold, and I know I can feel its energy. Good stuff has happened in this class, and so the offering is consecrated and dedicated to the upliftment of human consciousness through the ministry that is Unity of Independence. Amen. And thank you all, and good night.